Hello everybody, Jordan Nelson here. Today we're going to talk about my top 10 tips on how to make a great first wedding film so you can continue to book more. So let's get started. Alright, so if you want to get into wedding videography, you're going to want to build a solid portfolio, and this first wedding film is what's going to start that off. Now, I don't want to put a large amount of pressure on you to make an incredible first wedding film, or else, you're doomed. You're never going to get any more weddings ever again. What I want to do is I want to help you focus on a few things to really make your wedding film clean and tidy, so that people who are watching it aren't going to be distracted by big errors because you are a first-time wedding filmmaker, and they'd be willing to then pay for your services. So this is your first one, the first one in your portfolio. They're going to watch this one piece of work that you've created in order to decide if they want to book you or not. So really, I just want to go through how to make a really clean and tidy and solid first wedding film. So do 5 shooting tips and 5 editing tips. So shooting tips. There's nothing more distracting than when you're watching a wedding film and there is just a lot of shake to the camera. It seems like the camera's moving everywhere. And it's just really distracting. It's hard to focus on what the video is actually about. So think about a few things to mitigate that. Obviously, first of all, would be to stabilize your camera. Tripod, monopod, a glide cam, a gimbal, steady cam, any of those. You can buy one, rent one, whatever you can do to help stabilize your footage. Because if you're gonna go handheld all day, there are certain points when you very well could go handheld, it would be fine. But if you're gonna go handheld all day, there's just gonna be a lot of shake. It's gonna be distracting. You also might wanna think about using slow motion. So shooting at 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, slowing it down really help to lessen that camera shake if you do have some throughout the day. Shooting tip number 2, do not go handheld at really long focal lengths. I see this all the time in the ceremony portion of a wedding film. The videographer's in the back or somewhere off to the side, and they zoom all the way in so that they can see a close-up of the couple rather than getting closer to them themselves. And they're shooting handheld, and when you have that focal length so long, every tiny little movement, even if you're super steady, is going to show a lot of shake. That's just something I'm seeing quite a bit of. So if you're gonna be shooting at long focal lengths, make sure you're using a tripod or something to stabilize that footage. Tip number 3, make sure to capture every important part of the day. I have an entire video laying this out. I'll link it up here. You can watch that separately. It details each shot that is really important for you to get for the entirety of the wedding day. Tip number 4, do not use simply on-camera audio. So if they are doing their vows, or the pastor or the officiant is speaking and you want to play that over the top, do not just use your in-camera audio. If you have a Rode VideoMic Pro, that's a little bit better, but still the quality is not going to be that clean and tidy and solid look that we're going for. I use the Tascam DR10L and I hook it up to the groom to get those, but before I had that, I did several weddings without anything like that. I just had my Rode VideoMic Pro. For one of them, the night before, I went and recorded the bride and the groom what they were going to say to each other. They had personal messages to each other that they were reading, and I went and recorded those and then played it over the top of the video. That is another good option because I had my Rode VideoMic Pro, I was really close to them so they could speak right into the microphone, and it was really high quality audio. But during the wedding day, even with the Rode VideoMic Pro, you really can't get close enough to them for that audio to be very good. So if you don't have any type of external microphone, I would just suggest doing a musical type highlight video rather than trying to get the vows or any type of other audio beforehand. So either rent or invest in some type of external mic so you can get high quality audio. All right, so shooting tip number 5 is to practice getting your exposure, your white balance, and your focus before you even do the wedding. Practice at how to get quick at those. So if you have autofocus, know what type of autofocus mode you want to use. Learn what your camera really struggles with in terms of focus too. So if someone is moving to and fro and you have a really wide open lens, so the aperture is at, let's say, like 2 or 3, and someone's moving to and fro and your camera will go out of focus, maybe that will help you during the processional. Maybe you're going to have to increase the f-stop on that aperture so that it's at something like 15 to 20, so that you're gonna have a lot in focus, you're not gonna have that problem. Just things like that, how to use your ISO, how to use your shutter speed, how to use your aperture. And let's say you're in a church and a lot of them have tungsten light and you don't want your footage to come out all super yellow. Some cameras are great at automatically white balancing, which is great. Some cameras aren't, so you just need to know. So practice indoors, practice outdoors, practice in the sun, practice with white light, practice with yellow light. Do some research on the venue and where you're gonna be. Do some research on what the weather's gonna be like, so you can figure out what type of lighting you're gonna be working in and what type of conditions. So you can think ahead as to what you're gonna need to know. So if the church has really yellow light, know that. Practice, how am I going to compensate for really yellow light that's not that good? Sometimes there's not a whole lot you can do. Like sometimes the lighting's just terrible and you're just gonna have to deal with it. But just make sure you don't go in there blind. All right, so now editing tips. So one thing I see quite a bit is when people stay on clips for far too long. So you're just on this one shot and you're just waiting for the next thing to happen. It's like you've been on it for 8 or 9 seconds. I did a whole video on this. I'll link it up here, and you can check that out. But you don't want the audience to get bored or feel like you just don't have enough content to make a long enough video, so it feels like you're just trying to stretch things out. You don't want that. You want there to be good pacing to your wedding film. Tip number 2, do not use copyrighted music. So if you're using famous songs that everyone knows, there's a great chance that you do not have the right to use that song, because you would need to reach out to that artist or the licensing company or whatever directly to get that music. So if you bought that song on iTunes, you still do not have the right to put it in your wedding film and then make money from that. That does not fall under fair use, and your video very well might get taken down if you do post it online. I know there are a ton out there, you're probably like, Jordan, I see it all the time, but they're not your songs to use. So I use Epidemic Sound for my wedding films, but there's all kinds of different online licensing platforms that you can use, so you can go ahead and check those out. All right, so editing tip number 3, since we're still in the theme of a clean and tidy and solid video, try to edit your film to the beat of the music. And along with that, make sure the music that you choose matches up with the type of footage that you have on screen. I know it seems obvious, but I've seen that kind of stuff before where it's just kind of like, that's an interesting choice. Now, you have a lot of creative freedom, but if you want to make a solid, clean, tidy video, just make sure that the music kind of goes along with the story that is being told throughout the day. Tip number 4, do not overdo your color grade. Don't put something on there and blast it up to 100% like a LUT, which is kind of like a video preset. Don't blast it like that, because you're just going to make everything feel not very natural, not very real. You want to try to make the skin tones look as real as possible. So just be wary on your very first wedding film if you're really trying to go with some super stylized look. Now you can definitely do it great. Like, don't take my advice if you know exactly what you're doing as far as color grade goes. But if you haven't done it a whole lot before and you're going to try to go with some super stylized look, that might be great for your style. But if you're trying to book more weddings, you might want to go more just on the conservative route as far as the color grade. So as people will say, yes, I want something like that, rather than something that's just like super teal and orange, because I know that's in with like a lot of YouTubers and in film. But if you go overboard with that, you're going to have a lot of super orange people and a lot of super teal highlights. So make sure you're trying to make it look as natural as possible. All right, so editing tip number 5, do not try to do slow motion on a clip that is 24 frames per second. It's not made to be slowed down. I see that all the time. People are shooting the entire day in 24 frames per second and then decide in the editing room they want to slow it down. That would look really cool. And then they do, and it's really choppy. Like, people are moving like 1 frame at a time, it looks like. Now in editing systems, you can do things that can help with that, like optimized flow in Final Cut Pro. So there are things that you can do to maybe help. But for most shots, that's not going to work, and there's still going to be a difference. So if you think that using slow motion is going to be a good idea for your wedding film, I would just shoot in 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, whatever you have. But don't decide afterwards that you want a lot of slow motion in your video if you shot all day at 24 frames per second. It's not going to look clean and tidy like we talked about. It's going to really distract and be like, it just doesn't look right. You want your next client to think, wow, this looks really professional, well done. I'm willing to pay money to get something like that. And then one bonus tip, so tip number 11, have others watch your wedding film to see if there's anything you can do to improve upon it before you send it to the couple. Because just your average person's impression of the video is who your next client is going to be, the people that are watching it. So if there are glaring issues that they're seeing in your video and you're not showing anyone, you're just sending it right off and then posting it, and that's that, then there may have been ways that you could have improved and that your next client will be more likely to book you. So That's a bonus tip. Make sure you're doing that and humbly receive that criticism. Hopefully it's helpful criticism and constructive, but that will help you to know and gauge what you're doing well and what you're not. All right, that's it for me. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. If you like that video, go ahead and click that subscribe button right about here. And if you want to see more content just like this, go ahead and click that playlist I have right there. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.